I'm going to produce someone who's going to take over. And it's worked wonderfully well. I don't know why we waited so long. I could have had you writing for me in my 20s, and then I could have just sat back all these years. But anyway, how we met up was that a year or so, I'd put Molly Murphy on hold. Who of you are already fans of the Molly Murphy series? Oh, is anybody who doesn't know it yet that I have to explain a little bit? Oh, all right, yes. Well, we were up to book 17 in the series, which is quite long running. And at the very beginning, Molly has escaped from Ireland. She's had to flee when she's accidentally killed the man who was trying to rape her, who was the landowner's son. And she knows she'll get no justice. So she flees to New York using another woman's identity. And while she is on Ellis Island, a murder occurs, and the name she is using shows up as the prime suspect. So that was the driving force behind Ellis Island, the first book in the series. And Molly since then has had some struggles and some triumphs, and has got as far as book 17. But I was also writing one of the Royal Spinus books a year, and one of the big standalones, and frankly, 3 books a year was, even for me, was craziness. But Claire came to me, and what'd you say?
Well, of all of the books, I love all of my mom's books, but Molly Murphy really touches my heart. I've worked a lot with immigrants. The immigrant story is just very dear to me. And as I was reading them, and I was reading Facebook, and people would say, when is the next Molly Murphy? And I knew that my mom wasn't planning on doing any more Molly Murphys. I thought about it, and I came to her and I said, what if I could take over the Molly Murphy series? People, under your direction, or if you have time, co-writing it. But I think people love this series, and I would absolutely love to have that chance. It would be for me like writing fan fiction of this series that I really like, get to go around and play in that world that I didn't want to have disappear after book 17. Even though that's a really long running series, there's just so much more to explore in that world.
Yeah, so she came to me and said, I think I'd like to do the series with you. Now, I was slightly ambivalent, because she's my daughter and I love her. And then you thought, well, what if this isn't going to work? To have a close working relationship and to say, I'm sorry, but you don't quite get it. I knew you were a good writer, but to pick up someone's voice, to pick up a first person Molly Murphy voice is a huge challenge. So I said, well, we'll give it a try. And so we started off, and I hadn't done a book for 4 years. And so to bring people back into the series, Claire was the one who came up with the plot, and you said?
Well, I said, people will have forgotten a little bit. Let's take it back to the beginning. And so there's this, at the core of Molly's story is her coming through Ellis Island. And I think that's really a big motivator for her, having had that immigrant experience herself. So I said, let's take her back to Ellis Island. So we're going to have a mystery happen on Ellis Island, and it's going to be someone that Molly really identifies with. It's a young Irish woman who, just like Molly, is accused of the murder. And so, of course, Molly is going to be loving but headstrong and throw herself right into the middle of trying to help this young woman, like she always does.
Yeah. It's interesting in that when I started the series, the whole concept of women's rights was not foremost in my mind. Molly is literally struggling to survive. Every day is one where she might not survive any longer. She has no support system in New York. It's winter. She has nowhere to go. She could freeze to death. She could be snapped up into prostitution. Any of these things could happen to her. But the moment she's gradually getting her feet, she comes to, and then of course afterwards when she's married, she comes to realize the whole concept of women's rights. If I took you back to Molly's New York and gave you a walking tour, you would not feel too strange. You would know where you were. You could walk around. There were already some skyscrapers. You would be able to recognize Broadway, and there would be theaters and things. And then you would remember that half the population couldn't vote. half the population, the women were actually the property of their husband. If you came to the marriage with property, it immediately belonged to him. If you tried to leave the marriage, you could not take the children. He was allowed by law to beat you with a rod no thicker than his thumb, which is one of people say is that's where the rule of thumb came from. I'm not sure about that, but we'll debate that one. But anyway, and of course Molly's, the first close contacts that Molly makes are with Sid and Gus, who are they're a lesbian couple who are rich enough to lead their own life and not care a fig about society, and are very much passionate suffragists. And so Molly really finds an expression there. And of course, one of the problems is she's married. And I get letters all the time, and Claire, you'll start getting them too, saying, I can't believe that Daniel Sullivan is so awful, and he's such a bully and everything. Actually, for the time, he is a really understanding man, in that he doesn't clamp down on her and say, you do as I tell you. He sort of says, Molly, I really wish you wouldn't sometimes when she puts her life in danger, but he doesn't bully her and he doesn't lay down the law, but he could. And the fact that he's also a police captain, it would really show very badly on his career if she's a detective and if she outsmarts him. But in this book, we've sort of we've moved a little, haven't we?
Yes, we definitely have. And that was something I really wanted to have happen, is to have their relationship shift a little bit. He definitely recognizes more what a gifted detective she is. And I shouldn't give too much away.
No, they have to buy it first.
Yes, but you will definitely see a little shift in how he treats her, although you might not see her keeping her promise of keeping out of trouble. That will never change.
Yeah. So the other thing that I think we've had very nice early reviews, and the other thing the early reviews have picked up on is that Molly is a very realistic woman in that she's juggling home, marriage, motherhood with her detecting. She has a 2-year-old son, and he's not the sort of 2-year-old sons you sometimes get in books who just miraculously go to sleep for most of the day. He's a normal little boy who has to be watched and who runs around. And she also has a teenage ward who is just coming into her teens and who is going to be a typical teenager and just finding her feet, isn't she?
Yes, and I think we both have had that experience of trying to do a job, and you trying to write, having little children at home.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And so the day doesn't go as you might hope that it would go, that you have the whole day to just do whatever it is you want to do, but it always has to be organized around your chores and your children. And I think we wrote about that. We wrote about Molly organizing even her detecting around her chores and her children and her mother-in-law and all of the normal things someone has to have in life.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned the mother-in-law, because I thought, I didn't say this to Rhys somewhat sadistically, the mother-in-law is living with him due to various circumstances. And if those of you know the series, remember that Daniel's mother has never really warmed to Molly. She wanted Daniel to make a much better marriage. And so for Molly to have her mother-in-law in the house, in addition to the children and all, is an irritation, let's put it that way.
Well, I think Molly, as we can, you want your characters to grow and develop. And I think we can see she has learned patience and tolerance, because in the first few books, she would not have put up with mother-in-law is always very sweet and never sort of really criticizes, but she sort of says, oh, is that the way Daniel likes his pork chops now? He always used to like the way I cooked them, And Molly's quite patient on the whole. And she does appreciate having mother-in-law there to leave Liam with occasionally, but I think we'd like to get rid of mother-in-law. So the next book, mother-in-law's gone again. But
I thought when we had the fire book, we could lose mother-in-law, but miraculously she survived it.
I know, yeah, it's annoying, isn't it?
That was all your fault.
I keep trying to kill her off. She won't go.
Right.
I should have made her older to start with. If she'd been in her 90s in the first book, I could have got rid of her by
Well, then
now.
you would have been Aunt Perry with Aunt Vespasia, who, was trekking on. Anne did finally, Aunt Vespasia left us at probably 101, which is a remarkable age for a Victorian lady. In the spin-off with young Daniel. Yeah. But Thomas and Charlotte had Aunt Vespasia all along. So you didn't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, when we were saying about, having a family and trying to, I remember when my kids were in their teens or in their pre-teens, and I'd be writing, and I'd say, I'm going to work, do not disturb me unless there's a complete emergency. And then there'd be a knock on the door. Mom, can I come in? Is it an emergency? It's really an emergency. Please, can I come? And one of them would, I've got 3 girls and a boy. One of them would come in and they'd go, she says my hair looks stupid like this. And I would say, get out, don't come near me again. And then a little while later, I'd hear, crash, tinkle, tinkle, don't tell Mum I can mop up the blood. So we both come through that. So we both feel very much. But I think the interesting thing in this book, too, is those of you who followed from the beginning will know that Molly brought with her a poor little girl and her brother to be with their father in America, Bridie. And she was 5 when she first came. And she's lost her mum, and she's come to a new life, and we feel very sorry for her. She's a sweet little girl, and Molly has stayed really part of her life. And then her brother and her father decide they're going to go down to Central America to help to dig the Panama Canal. And they want Molly to find her a place to put her into service as a tiny girl servant. And of course, Molly can't let that happen. And so Molly's mother-in-law takes her in to train her in service, and turns out, of course, not to train her in service at all, but to make her a member of the family. And now Molly and Daniel are officially adopting her. So for the first time in her life, she feels quite secure. And because of that, we're seeing a little bit of independence, aren't we?
Yes. And she's behaving like a typical teenager would behave when she has a little bit of independence in her life. And I really enjoy that part of the book. I think she's a great character, and I definitely had my own struggles. I have boy-girl twins that are 18. Their older brother is already graduated from college, but I have very recent experience with twins, with teens. And so, those struggles come from my own life, where they might do something, Bridie might do something that she thinks is completely reasonable, but is actually quite mean to Molly. So, and Molly has to keep her temper as she deals with that as well. It's feeling secure, I think, and also because these lovely neighbors, Sid and Gus, and for those of you who don't know them, they're really Miss Elena Goldfarb and Miss Augusta Walcott of the Boston Walcotts, but they refer to themselves as Sid and Gus. They are very educated. They're just typical Renaissance women, aren't they? They're always trying something new. They might turn their front room into a yurt, or they might be cooking Japanese food, or one of them want to ride an elephant once? I mean, they have all these great ideas. They went to Vienna to study with Freud for a while. And so they've taken Bridie, this is the teenage girl who's very bright, but going to a regular public school. They're taking her under their wing, and they're trying to educate her some more. And so Bridie feels rather special, because there's 2 ladies taking a lot of interest in her and teaching her things. So she sort of thinks maybe it might be nicer to live with the ladies than with Molly, because Molly makes her do things. So we've got a struggle going on in the book, but it all comes out nicely in the end, so we'll see. I mean, who wouldn't want to live with Sid and Gus? I would move in with Sid and Gus. I think they're absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
Especially if there were an elephant. I mean, who can resist that?
There's no room for an elephant on Patchin Place. So,
no. Yeah. So Ellis Island, Rhys, we had a lot of conversations over the years about researching you know, the time to, because you're in a real place, a real city, so you can't just make stuff up, as we say. So going back to Ellis Island, Claire, did you have to go and learn this yourself? Or did you rely on what your mom already knew?
Well, I did read very, very carefully all 17 books, taking notes, and to make sure that, you know, we didn't do anything that had already happened. But in terms of the geography, I didn't go there myself, but I did a lot of research to make sure that I understood, not just reading the first book and making sure all the places that, as Molly had experienced it, but then reading up a lot on Ellis Island myself. And you need to know really interesting little details. For instance, somebody might need to go to the bathroom and you think, was there a flush toilet out there at that time? You know, little things like that. And you think, okay, 1907, and yes, there was. You think, would there be a handle or would there be a chain? You can't have somebody do something very simple without having seen exactly what it would be like if you want it to be historically correct.
I mean, that's what I found in the first books, because the whole series came about because I had a free afternoon in New York and I went to Ellis Island. And, you know, it was just a trip to Ellis Island. Oh, I've never been here. Let's go and take a look. And I was unprepared for this emotional overload I felt. Just standing there, and you could sort of feel those walls crying out. And I thought, I have to write about this place. And I pictured people coming, and they'd come from terrible situations. They'd come from a burned village or a famine or a war. And they got as far as Ellis Island. And for most of them, someone said, welcome to America. And everything they dreamed of was going to come true. But then there were others. For some reason, they were not going to be admitted. What if you had 5 kids and one of them was going to fail the medical inspection and was going to be sent back? And I read about a family who did this the other day, that one of their children was going to be sent back. And as it happened, they kept her. I think she was like 4 or something like that. And she got some disease, but they kept her for like 3 months on Ellis Island by herself without her parents. And I thought, well, what would you do if they said, no, one of your children can't be admitted? So I thought, and then also, you're standing on Ellis Island and you're looking across this narrow, bright strip of water to the Manhattan skyline, and you know you can't take that final step unless the government says you can. So I remember thinking as I stopped, this is the ultimate locked room mystery, because the only people on this island have been brought in by the government and can leave by the government. So that was where the idea for Molly Murphy first came from. And then she steps ashore. And then I thought, oh, wait, what do I actually know about New York in 1901? That's nothing. And I thought, I am doomed to research on every page for the rest of my life. And it really turned out like that, especially the first few books, because as Claire was saying, there's so much you don't know. Molly is tailing someone. I thought, wait, what does she write with? You know, you can't have an inkwell and a pen by your side. You know, what did they have in those days? And so I thought, well, did they have fountain pens? So then I do my research, and I find, yes, they did have fountain pens, but they were such a luxury that Molly at that time she was starving, but she couldn't have afforded one anyway. So I had to improvise just as she would. And I think in a pawn shop, she saw a little ladies' dance card with a pencil down the side. So that's what she uses. But everything, you had to stop and think, wait, how would they do this? Now I feel quite comfortable, you know, 18 books later. And also, at the beginning, I would go to New York and I would walk where she walked. And I would say, oh, do you get the wind coming straight off the Hudson here? Can you hear the tugs on the East River here? How far can you see up Broadway here? So all those things. And people would write to me and say, oh, you had Molly walk from Canal Street to so-and-so. That's completely impossible. And I'd write back, I did it. You know, she was from the west coast of Ireland. She was used to walking 5 miles into school. It was nothing to her. In fact, I once in New York, I'd been to the Metropolitan Museum and I was staying on 23rd Street. And the traffic was terrible, and I walked. That's quite a long way. That's what, from 59th to 23rd is quite a few blocks. But, you know, I did.
No, it's from 82nd, honey.
What?
It's from 82nd Street.
Oh, 82nd, right, yeah, you're right.
Right. Yeah, I've walked it many times.
Yeah,
so, right.
It is, yeah, it's a long way down. But So, you know, that I think the research is one of the fun things. The only thing you find is that you get swallowed up into it. Don't you? Claire has been wonderful because she's a natural researcher. You know, she has degrees in sort of every subject you can think of. And so what she's been doing is reading the New York Times for every day to see what was really happening and coming up with really great things, right?
It's been so much fun. You know, I'd much rather read the New York Times for 1907 than for today, with everything going on today. And so there's a Times machine, and you can read the New York Times, all of it. You can see the ads, you can see, you know, what did a pair of shoes cost, or a nice suit, where were people going for vacation. You can find very funny stories.
What was that one about the man?
Oh, so there was one about a man who had come to court to sue for alienation of his wife's affections. And the man who was accused, it said, twirled his mustache nattily and said that if he could not keep his wife, he did not deserve to have her.
And didn't he say something about he was much more attractive or something?
Yes, he was much more attractive.
This is in the New York Times. I mean, that's one thing one notes, is that their method of reporting was much more subjective and in some ways amusing, wasn't it?
It was very amusing.
Yeah, yeah.
It was probably more local too. I mean, you know, New York Times, we subscribe to it. It is a local newspaper, so there is always a section, you know, just about New York, even though it's become more national. Rhys, when you started doing that, was everything digitized, or did you have to do microfiche for quite a while?
I did some microfiche, yes, yeah.
Which is almost a lost art today.
Yeah,
but
No, I think digital came about like in 2005, 2006. Everything became quite easy, because I know by the time I was doing The Edge of Dreams, I was looking to see what really happened, and it was September 1905, and there had been a train crash of the elevated railroad. What had happened was a 9th Avenue train was routed onto the 6th Avenue route by mistake, came around the corner way too fast and plunged down to the street below. And so I read about it. It was on September the 11th, strangely enough, too. I remember reading about that, and I thought, oh, Molly would have known about this. It would be, everybody in New York would be talking about it. And then I thought, what if she was on that train? And then I thought, what if it wasn't an accident? You know, then I'm off. And so that's that's the rabbit holes of research, is they take you where you don't think you're going to go. And if you're open to it, you get really fun stories. Now, the next book that we've just finished the first drafts of has more to do with newspapers, doesn't it? Because William Randolph Hearst is obviously running the rival newspaper, and he's a big part of the story, isn't he?
And I think I can say this because you've actually put out a chapter from this, but part of our research for that involved something I read in the New York Times about a boat fire on the Hudson. And so we read that, and we thought, what if Molly was on that boat, and how would that influence the whole story?
Yeah, I think one of the fun things about this series, one of the things people like about this series, is it's closely tied to real history. And you do get what you might call your narrative nonfiction from reading the books. You know about, the one where in the garment industry and the abuses the girls went through. When I was writing that book, I read the Senate depositions after the Triangle Fire. So every abuse that happens to a girl in my book had happened to a real girl. And, things like that really matter. I don't like history books where people make up things. I like to, and if you know anything at all, if you're reading a book and there's one thing that's wrong, you go, wait a minute. I know I was asked to blurb a book, and I won't say what it was. It was coming out, it was being published with a major publisher, and he came out of the Savoy Hotel and hailed a cab to a less salubrious part of the city under Charing Cross Station, and I thought, it's 100 yards. I used to walk it all the time.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah. And, these are people, I think they're often, you can say, this person has only been to London on a tour bus, They've never got the feel of. That's what's so nice about when I read a book where you've got the feel of the city, like Cara Black's Paris, you you know what it smells like and what happens in each little street and everything. And I love that, don't you?
Oh, I do. But it can go too far. I mean, I find myself at a certain point saying, oh no, well, Molly can't take her umbrella today because it was 80 degrees
That's right,
that day. You know? You have to let there be some fiction.
Yeah, I mean, but we've never yet had had a non-fan letter saying, you know, you said Molly went out today and she didn't take a jacket. Well, actually, the temperature plunged at 2 o'clock.
So, Claire, you're going to be, at some point, you're going to go on writing this without your mom. Is that right?
I think that's what we would like to have happen.
Yeah, I mean, I will gradually step back more and more, I think. I mean, we're hoping, we've done 2 books together. We're just coming up with the proposals for the next 2. And, you know, I will be gradually stepping back, I think. And then maybe after that, it will be Rhys Bowen's Molly Murphy, written by Clare Broyles.
Well, the only reason I asked is that you are such a repository of information that you know Claire is going to need to.
Oh yeah, I mean obviously
I
will always be involved in a part of it, but you know to be able to hand over the major. I mean she did that a lot with the next book. She said we're quite a few chapters from the end, and she said I've sort of got it in my head how the end's going to go now. And I said, great, run with it. And she did. And the good thing about that was that you came up with that very clever twist, which we can't tell anybody, which really made the end, so much better.
Wow.
Yeah. But I do think that, yes, before I take it over more, we will need to go and spend a summer in New York going around.
Unfortunately, you'll be able to do that if all goes well. So, you know, it has been hard for authors to do any on-the-ground research for the last couple of years, but we can hope that maybe that will.
It was very annoying because I'm going to be in New York. Claire's coming with me to Malice Domestic, to the convention, and then I'm going to New York for the Edgars. But Claire can't take more time off school, so otherwise she could come with me then and I could show her Molly's New York. Which, in fact, my publicist wrote the other day and said, how about a walking tour of Molly's New York? And I said, well, I could do that.
That would be great.
The nice thing is it's all there. Those of you who go to New York, you know, you can. She lives in Greenwich Village. She lives on Patchin Place, which is right opposite the old Jefferson Market building, you know, and you've got all of Mulberry and Hester and all of those streets. And, you know, that's what I love, is I could do a lovely walking tour of Molly's New York because it is all there. And I've had some lovely letters too. I think my favorite letter was a woman who said, I grew up in that part of Greenwich Village. My mother grew up in that part of Greenwich Village. My grandmother grew up in that part of it, and she used to shop at that bakery. Thank you for bringing my childhood back to me. And I thought that's when you know you've done a good thing. And someone hasn't said you got it entirely wrong. You know?
So I think that all of the earlier books are still in print. Am I right?
Yeah.
So if any of you have not read your way through the first 17 books, you have that treat in store, which is great because that's not true for all long-running series today because of the paper shortages and press time and all. A lot of early books and series have dropped out of print, which I hope will eventually be corrected. But if you're frustrated by that, it's just that the pandemic has created a lot of nightmares for publishers and the supply chain, and so it can be difficult. But I think that I have been able to order all of the Mollies, so that's really good news.
Yeah, I don't know about, there might be a couple in the middle. We switched formats, didn't we? I don't know whether they brought all the original ones out in the bigger format eventually. I think they did, didn't they?
I think so.
Yeah. So everything should be there.
Good.
Yeah, good.
How about questions? Any of you have questions that you would like to ask the authors?
Yeah. Yes.
I actually had a question about the Royals finance.
Yes.
And I know people, so we've been listening to that rather than, you know, so it's on audio.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one that has said, oh my God, the reader is just not as good. I realized that I forgot the woman's name, you know, she passed.
Yes.
She was just wonderful.
Yeah.
Are we moving on to another reader for that?
No, I think you'll find she is getting better. I've given her little pointers along the way. And there were things I didn't like to, you know, the problem was Catherine Kellgren, the first reader, was
so good.
She was so good, and she was nominated for the Audie Award for every single book. She won it once, beating out Meryl Streep for Best Female Narrator. So So she had that great gift of bringing every character to life without resorting to caricature. If she was doing like the old Cockney grandfather, she didn't have to do, you got the feeling of who he was.
Yeah.
And I did a wonderful promo with her once in which I interviewed all my characters.
Oh,
and so she was everybody.
love that.
And that was really fun to do. But she, unfortunately, she got a very aggressive lymphoma. Or was it, no, leukemia, when she was in her 40s and died within about 2 months. And it was a terrible shock. I knew her quite well, you know. It was, and so we had to find somebody new, and they kept sending me audition tapes, and nobody was quite right. And this one did sound like a nice young upper-class girl, and so that was the best we could do. And, you know, sometimes you can't get exactly what you want, and so I'm hoping with each book we're gradually being molded more into who I want her to be. But I'm sorry, I can't bring Catherine back, you know? Yeah. Yes?
So speaking of the audio for
Yeah.
the different series, I'm curious as to, because I've listened to a lot of them too and read some in print, and I'm wondering if, as the author, when you've listened to the audio versions, is there anything that kind of struck you like, oh, I didn't think of it that way when I was writing, but the way that this narrator has brought it to life, has that affected your perception of any of the characters or the...
I try not to listen to too much of the audio because I'm listening like, oh my God, what a clumsy sentence. Why did Did I say that word again? I've used that word on this page, you know. It all comes out and haunts you like that, which is, you know, is really hard. So I was just listening today. I've got a new big standalone coming out in the summer called Where the Sky Begins. And the person I chose to do I do in my contract now get to choose my narrator, which is very nice. The person that I chose has decided to take a break from doing, or perhaps she's got another acting job somewhere. And so I had to do my second best one, but I said I need to hear that she can do a Cockney accent because my heroine is you know, a lower class Londoner. And so I was listening to her audition tape today, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, this is really nice, yeah. Oh, I like this. Oh, and so I was quite happy. I would have listened to more. I was rather sad when it stopped. So, you know, sometimes it's good.
Well, this is my first audiobook, and I am listening through, and I'm really enjoying it. I do find that sometimes the way that she has Daniel speak is not the way I had pictured the sentence sounding, but it brings something a little bit different out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Sometimes, you know where your emphasis is, but I mean, like things like, you know, what's that in the road ahead? No, what's that in the road ahead? Well,
Tim had a question.
Yeah.
I'm Claire's husband, so I have a question for both of you. I saw one half of this going on in the house, but can you talk about your process, how you collaborated?
Oh, that's a very good question.
I know that it was written in the summer of 2020, so about Thanksgiving a little bit.
Yeah.
But can you talk about how you did it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. How, you know, what was our process? Because we didn't really know to start with, did we? We talked together and we talked through what we would like as a plot. And then I think those first chapters, we sort of felt our way a bit, like, I'll do this bit and you do that bit. And then we sort of felt more comfortable. And then Claire would say, well, I'd like to do the party scene. And then I'd say, well, I'd like to do so. And then so we'd take pieces we liked. And then the first thing we'd do was we'd go through and edit each other's pieces. And it's funny, we did an interview this week, and the interviewer said, if that were me with my sons, we would have killed each other. And so she said, you know, did you have lots of fights? And I can truly say that since this child was born, we have never had one fight, never. And we really, I think, we make each other so much better because we are quite willing to listen to each other and to accept criticism. And you know, I've been able to say to her things like, because it was her first book, I don't think she'd have used that word. I think that word's anachronistic, you know, because I have more feel for it than she does. But it wasn't very much, was it ever? And we, you know, the other thing too is because I knew much more about New York than Clare does. She would write the scene with the action, and I would go through and put in, you know, as she turned onto Fifth Avenue, she noticed the blah, 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 because I knew those things. So, and that's very important to give someone, every scene should be rooted in that good sense of place. And I'm lucky because I bought, when I was doing the early Molly books, I was at the New York Historical Society, and I bought all these books of photographs of New York in 1900. So pretty much any street I want, I can find a picture of. I can tell you what's on the billboard. I can tell you what the name of the tailor shop was. And then I've also got New York interiors, so I can look at a middle-class drawing room and see how awfully over-furnished they were and overstuffed and everything. Everything from a dentist office to a food counter. The most amazing picture that I ever found was the food counter in Macy's. And in the middle of the display is a big stack of cans of chile con carne. Now, if you ever said, Molly went home and opened a can of chili con carne, I can tell you, you would be deluged with letters saying, don't be so stupid. So there are always things you know, but you can't use. Yeah,
definitely. And I know that anytime Molly had to go somewhere, sort of from street to street, passing things, I would say, okay, this you can do this part.
Yeah, she went from A to B. Figure it out.
Yes, because this will be 10 hours of research for me, but you know what it is already.
Right, But you found out, Clare, because she's been doing all this research, found out some fascinating things that actually come in the book. And one of them was that you could go out of a back entrance, or you could go down into a subway station.
There's a hotel that had an entrance into a subway station. So you could take an elevator down further, and then you would be in a subway station.
You could go, it was like a secret entrance to a hotel. You could go along the platform, and you sort of could come up the back way into a hotel. Well, that was very useful to our plot.
Yes.
So, you know, things like that. You keep finding, well, New York subway stations are fascinating in themselves, aren't they? I mean, they're just, every subway station is different. And you can find out fascinating. The more you research, the more interesting it gets, really.
So did you go back and forth to Ellis Island? Did you sail over there and sail back?
What, this time?
Anytime.
No, I did the first time I was there. That was the only time I've actually been there in the flesh, but I did take photos, and I do have all the books, and I do have, of course, this time I had all printed out the big plans. The other thing I did once was I've got a map of Manhattan in 1900, which is very useful because not all the streets went through, you know. She went up 7th Avenue. No, she didn't. You know, you learn things like that. And so having those in front of you, because Ellis Island, things had to happen, and someone came out of one door and got lost around another way, and someone else tried to go to a restroom, and, you know, so all those things were important.
Isn't it a national monument now?
Yeah, oh yes.
Right, so do you know, have they kept it as it was?
They recreated it as it was. They had to completely, it had fallen into complete disrepair, and they had to bring it back to exactly as it was. You know, this is the second Ellis Island. The first Ellis Island they built burnt down within a year. It was made of wood.
Right.
And so this is the brick one. And so they've tried to recreate it exactly as it was. And if you do the tour, you can go through as they would. You could come from the ferry, walk across into the baggage room, leave the baggage, go up the steps into the big hall, go through the whole process, come out, and then there was the kiss and cry corner where you met up with the kissing post, where you met up with those who were waiting for you, and then you got on the ferry, and then you went back. So, you know, you can do all that on a virtual tour, which is quite nice.
That is nice.
Yeah. Yes.
Two questions. One is, you said that you couldn't travel because of school, and I wonder if you're a teacher or what. And also, what is your background as a writer?
I am a teacher. I teach music and math at a Montessori school. And yes, I don't like to leave the kids without music for too long, without their music teacher for too long. And then my background in writing, I've written music. I'm a composer. So I've written music. I've written a children's opera, written a lot of poetry. And then we actually tried our hand at some young adult fiction, which was fun, and people are always asking for the second in the series, but we sort of let fall by the wayside, I'm afraid. Yeah. But it's always been a part of my life. I've loved to, any job I had, I've loved to write a little parody.
Tell them about the OChem thing.
Oh, so I was a biology, at that point I was just a biology major, and I was taking organic chemistry. And so for my professor, I handed in a poem that said, "The naming of molecules is a difficult matter. It isn't just one of your holiday games. Now you may think that I'm mad as a hatter when I say each organic compound has 3 names." And then I went through, probably quite incorrectly, saying what the first 2 names were, because I wasn't very good at OChem. And then I went on, "The third is the name that the chemists keep secret, and this is the name that you never will guess. For it's not to be found in a book or a lecture, and this is the name that appears on the test." And so we had narrative evaluations at Santa Cruz, and the professor mentioned in my narrative evaluation that I had written quite an entertaining poem and that I might be better off as a lit major.
And she used to write wonderful parody poems for the family. She wrote a Christmas play once in which all of us were being exactly what we were. And my husband, who's always been this way, one of his lines was, "Janet, where's the Christmas tree?" Yeah, and she wrote, and his favorite one was the one where the Giants, the Giants were in the World Series against the Oakland A's, and that was when the earthquake happened, and it never happened, so the World Series never happened. So Claire wrote this wonderful thing about the second coming. So we're in the middle of the World Series, and the second coming happens, and she has the whole thing done as 2 commentators, typical sports commentators. And he says, he describes someone coming down in a blaze of glory. And what do you think that means, Tom? It means Jesus is back, Jack. And the whole thing was very, very funny. And some of the players rising up, and some of the people from the stands.
And then the commentators were drawing the little lines, like he avoided the blimp like that, and he went.
Anyway, any more questions before we get way off the subject, which we always do at this store, don't we?
Always. I'm usually the one who does it, so I'm happy that it's one of you. Yeah. I've been asked to repeat the questions for the virtual audience, which I have failed to do. My apologies. Oh. So if anyone else has one, yes, sir.
You talked about interviewing your character.
Mm-hmm.
Is that available on YouTube or somewhere?
I must check it out. If it is, I'll put the link on my Facebook page. Okay. It was some time. Obviously, Catherine's been dead for 5 or 6 years now. So whether it's still up, I'll ask. Also, I'll ask Berkeley and see if they have it still, because I did it for them. So we'll see.
So the question is an interview format that Rhys did with her now deceased audio narrator available for viewing. That would really be fun.
Yeah.
I hope you can do that. Yeah. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody else?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to ask Claire. Do you have now you're working on Molly Murphy's, and eventually you think perhaps you'll take it over. I wonder if you have any ideas for anything else.
Give me a moment. Does Claire have an idea for writing of her own that is not a Molly Murphy book?
I actually do, and it would be a historical mystery, and I'm looking at the 1920s. So I won't say more than that, but yes, it's in the thought process.
Yeah. You'll have to check Madonis, because she has a fabulous series in the 1920s.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. About a movie star, Rudolph Valentino, really good. Yeah.
You can see that we've unleashed kind of a monster here, right? Who knows?
She might be another 3 series a year person like me.
Well, she's younger, so she probably has more energy.
Well, I keep wanting to slow down, and I always say, well, perhaps
Rhys and I had lunch the other day, and we were both saying if we could just be 50 again, we could rule the world.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody had told us when we were 50 that when we were this age we'd be working 3 times as hard, we'd
I know. I often think that. Why am I doing this? But anyway, it's so much fun. And it's so gratifying to see all of you back and to have Rhys back and Clare with her. So
Yeah.
I think we've reached the moment where we're going to give away a book, which means I have to get up
Yeah.
and go get it. But
Yeah.
Rhys has set the stage for it because
Oh, right.
she's mentioned that Cara Black writes so beautifully about Paris. We launched Cara's book on Monday. Last Monday? No,
Yeah.
last Monday. It won't actually come into print for another few days. This was that whole paper shortage thing I mentioned to you. There was a dissonance, but our schedule is so crowded we couldn't rebook her for closer to her pub date, so we went ahead and did it anyway. But this is Murder at the Porte de Versailles, and it's the 20th in her series. And she has one arrondissement in Paris to go. Somehow she left one out.
Oh,
So
right.
there will be a 21st book. We talked about it in our program. But this is the 15th, the 15e arrondissement, which is a really fascinating part of Paris. And Cara, I think if any of you do Instagram, she often puts up photos of Paris and the places that she's been. She also has a wonderful website, and she's taken people on tours to France, to Paris,
Yeah, she does, yeah.
which I think is a wonderful thing to do. You can't really take people to 1901 New York, can you?
1907.
What a bummer.
No.
No tour for that. But you could actually
do
do
the
the
walking
walking tour
tour
of
of the
Greenwich Village.
streets quite
you-
easily,
You
yeah,
could do
yeah.
that, which would be
I'm
great.
going to try to, can you all hear me out there? There's
Yeah.
a phantom voice. I'm going to try to ask a question or two from the online audience,
Oh,
if that's
yes,
okay.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah.
We have a studio in there now where Patrick
Okay.
is doing all the videos, so he'll come out as a disembodied voice.
Yeah.
All right, let's do that before we give the book away.
Yeah,
What a
Okay,
good
great.
idea.
My friend Joyce, who's watching, asks, can you tell us anything about the next Royal Spinus novel and the upcoming standalone?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Well, first of all, the next upcoming standalone comes out. It's called Where the Sky Begins, and it's another World War II novel. And this time, it features a Cockney woman, an uneducated woman in London. And the book starts really with her having her whole life destroyed. Her house is bombed with her in it. She wakes up. She's taken to hospital. She has nothing. Her husband is off serving in the army somewhere, and she is sent out to the countryside because she's quite badly wounded. She's sent out to recuperate in the countryside in an upper-class woman's house who doesn't want her there. And it's a nice village in the middle of nowhere in the east of England, and so she thinks it's very nice until she hears this roar, and she finds she's right next to a bomber base. And every night these planes take off for Germany, and in the morning only half of them come back. So it's a place where life and death are very fragile. And so I think that's the whole theme of the story, is the fragility of life and death, and trying to make the best of what you can cling on to. And she's a wonderfully optimistic person who turns things around for so many people just by being her in the book. So I can't say any more because I don't want to give the story away. But then the next Royal Spinus, which is rather amusing, because if you look on the bestseller list, it's sitting up there really nicely with no cover yet. And it hasn't even been approved by my editor yet. So, but it's called Peril in Paris. And God, what fun it is to write, because Georgie has a chance to go over to Paris to stay with her friend Belinda. And Belinda is apprenticed to Chanel. And there's going to be a Chanel fashion show. And so there's all that wonderful Paris-y stuff. But Darcy's in Paris with her. And we find out in the middle of the book why he's in Paris with her, and I can say no.
Wow. And when are you expecting that one to publish? In the
It
fall?
publishes November 1st, I believe, or November 2nd.
Oh, good. And you'll be back.
I'll be back, yes.
Wonderful.
We'll do a big thing. And I have to say, normally if you come to my launch events, or now our launch events, there's usually champagne and very appropriate goodies. But because we're not allowed to eat in the store at the moment, I have brought a box of really nice chocolates. So when you come up and get a book signed, you can choose some goodies, all right?
Boy, do I feel like an ogre. No. But actually, I'm hoping by fall we can, because all of our events we loved. We have a staff member who baked, remember, for everything.
Yeah.
John made these fabulous, but we're a little nervous still about the handing things around. So, but maybe it will ease up by fall. Patrick King, I see that you are back there. Can you tell me what numbers we are looking at? Thank you. I'm sorry, you had a
I was
comment
going
to
to say,
make.
Patrick, did he have more questions? Disembodied Patrick, do you have more questions?
Answer to that. No more questions at the
All right.
moment.
All right. Well, then we'll revert back to giving a book away.
Yeah,
Right.
all right.
So numbers 1 through 12. You want, Claire, let's put you on the
Yes.
spot. You need to pick a number between 1 and 12.
5.
All right. Is that you?
Well done.
Number 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, take a look. If so. Excellent. All right. We have a winner. Yay. Here you are. Thank you.
I've read all her books so far.
Wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
And you're going to get me started on somebody else?
And that's book
She's
20.
got 20.
Yeah, so
Lovely.
there you are. I'm actually hopeful that Kara might be able to come and see us. Mark Pryor, who many of you know, has written a wonderful series about Hugo, who works for the American Embassy. He has his Paris World War II historical coming out. I just booked him for August 16th. I mean, this is how life goes. I just finished March, and I'm booking August.
Yeah.
You just can't. We have 41 visiting authors in March.
Oh, wow.
Between Zoom and live events, and it just goes on and on like this. But anyway, I'm hoping that I might coax Kara, if she's not in France, to come with Mark, and that way you could see her, but we could also talk about his book and Kara's wonderful book about the war in Paris. What's it called again?
3 hours in Paris, isn't it?
3 days?
No.
3
days?
hours?
Three,
Is it 3
is it
hours?
3 hours or 3 days?
Can't remember. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a wonderful
It's a-
book, and she's writing a sequel to it.
Yeah, she's written
Because
the sequel,
the character is
Yeah.
not done. The character is sent to Paris to assassinate Hitler,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for various
Yeah,
reasons.
it's 3 hours in Paris because
Yeah.
Hitler only stayed 3 hours in Paris, and
Ever.
nobody knew why. He went away very rapidly, and so Kara's premise is that it was a near assassination attempt.
A sniper.
A sniper,
A
yeah.
sniper.
It's
Right.
a really tense,
If only we
fantastic
could
book.
find one at the moment.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, more than one. One would be good.
Or two.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
And these are all going to be streamed for those of us that live
Yes,
in Southern
ma'am.
California.
Yes, ma'am.
That would be
All of our events for the last 20 years have been on video. That's why the pandemic did not shut us down, and actually we have grown considerably over the last 2 years, because what we've acquired because of this wonderful technology is a big international audience. And Patrick was really excited the other day. We were doing something, and he said, "Oh, look, it's our first question from Mongolia."
Oh, wow.
Yay! The hard part is time zones. It's really difficult. But the reason that we just put them up and everyone can view them as you want, because we're allowing for people in different time zones to watch them at their own pace. And because you all have been so great and bought so many books, now we are not forced to make you buy a ticket to support the program. The book sales have stayed just as, well, actually they've increased. So we are able to do our programs for free. And I turned down quite a lot of requests to do ticketed events because they just don't really work for us. I like the fact that you can all watch things at your leisure. Whenever, and also don't forget we have the podcast. For those of you who've mentioned audiobooks, you can listen to any of these. There's a whole, I think we've had 150,000 downloads for the author podcasts over the last couple of years. It's a project my husband started, and he's really enjoying it. And so he produces the podcasts, and they go up on our website also. So that's an additional way that you can watch them. Somebody asked if we could put subtitles, or on our videos, and we're just not going to go that far. I'm sorry, we're not Netflix, so we're not going to translate, for you. But
I could do the.
Right. And I love the audiobook idea. We did for Steve Barry. He did bring Scott. I'm trying to remember Scott's last name. He's a very famous audiobook narrator. Anyway, he came with Steve, and it was really an interesting program. And I will see if I can entice another audiobook narrator to come with an author at some point, because it's really interesting to hear what they have to say. And we've had a translator. Turned out that I went to Stanford with the guy who translated the Stieg Larsson books, and he lives in Albuquerque.
Oh, wow.
And he came to an event one time, and we had a really fabulous conversation about what translators do, how it works, what they get paid, on and on and on. So there are things that we can do, beyond the obvious, which I hope that we will get to. Anyway, thank you for your patience. Let's give the authors a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.